The Supernatural Jesus Club. A couple years back, I had a corrective surgery on one of my feet, so they basically had to break it and put it back together. Naturally, I had to wear a hard cast that went from my knee to my toes for several months, which bled into the school year. Now, for comfort purposes, my doctor suggested I get a little scooter where I can kneel my casted leg and push with my other. Being obviously temporarily handicapped, I would be approached by do-gooders and asked about my condition and whether or not I believed in God several times a week. Usually on Wednesdays, their approach, I later realized, was calculated. Usually it was just one or two people, so at first I didn't think too much of it. I would politely decline their offers and scooter away. This one afternoon, however, I had a couple of hours to kill between my classes, and as it was a nice day, I rolled out to the pavilion and settled into a little stone alcove away from activity. I didn't like the attention the scooter brought me. I was looking down at my phone when I heard people approaching. I tried to shrug it off, but being super self-conscious about my condition made me hyper-aware of them. It was a group of 8 or 9 people, and they hovered near me, talking in a tight circle, for a short while before surrounding me in the alcove. They seemed passive at first, and as I'm actively non-confrontational, I just sort of watched them form a semicircle around me and made themselves comfortable. Now, I was raised in a series of crappy neighborhoods, which also made me inherently suspicious of semicircles, so I took my phone out, texted my friend, instructing her to call in 10 minutes, and stuck my hand in my bag to keep hold of my knife, my pocket knife. Anyways, the friendlier of the group settled down next to me and went about introducing herself. "Hi, my name is, and I see that you're hurt. What happened?" Unfortunately for me, while being aggressively non-confrontational, I also have an irresistible desire to be clever, so I spit out one of the crappy, heroic, obviously fictional tales I've piled up to explain my otherwise boring injury. Sharp bike, saved that kid's life though, when in reality it was a simple, voluntary surgery done to fix a gap between my toes caused by an extra toe I had removed when I was 4 months old. Anyways, do-gooders like do-goodery things, so my little lie did nothing but draw them closer. They proceeded to go on telling their own stories, which I assumed they did to promote sympathy. The girl next to me had a miscarriage at 14 years old. The next closest had an abusive father. The one after her husband recently freed from a wrongfully convicted life sentence in jail, etc., etc. Let me just state that I in no way am trying to belittle these people and what they've been through. I have a naturally cynical way of describing things, and honestly, this story still bugs me to this day. Once they were all done, the girl next to me took over and said something about all their troubles, leading them to the almighty solution: Jesus Christ! Another disclaimer: I'm strongly non-religious. I respect people for their chosen faiths, as I believe it takes a great amount of courage to subscribe to a religion, but it's just never been my thing, you know? Continuing, she describes Jesus as this natural force that came into their lives, and as soon as they devoted their souls to him, he began helping them in mysterious ways. The girl next to me was healed of her depression and later conceived and carried to full term a beautiful child. The following was relieved of her abusive father and found the courage to move out. The other filed another endless appeal to get her husband released, and miraculously it worked, and so on and so on and so on. The whole time they're talking, I get the sense they've rehearsed this. I couldn't help but think to myself how many crippled kids they've cornered today, and just kept anxiously waiting for them to get to their point. As soon as they were done, those skills enough to shed a tear wiped their faces, and immediately reverted back to the dead-eye glare they came with. Then their spokesperson, the girl next to me, asked if I believed in God. Coming from a highly religious family, I've always had an answer to prepare for this type of stuff, a kind but forceful version of no, and I am not interested. They did not get the clue. They were asking about my childhood and what event in my life caused me to stray from my given path, the Lord's path, and eventually I got so fed up with it that I just started my awkward struggle to get up, mumbling something about having to get to class. This spokesperson, this Matita Pendeja, as we would say where I'm from, grabbed my scooter and lightly pushed it away, out of reach. Granted, I was not beneath swinging my leg around and knocking them all straight to hell, but like it's Sparta. But the girl put her hand on my shoulder and everyone took a collective step towards me, and she said, "Can we pray for you?" Okay, I'm starting to think this was all salvageable. I started thinking I could still get out of this without going all Black Widow on them with my pocket knife. So I politely suggested that they can pray for me on their own time, and as any good vibe is a good vibe, that they should respect my personal space though. The girl then proceeded to push the idea of prayer on me, so much so that it became overwhelmingly clear that in order to get rid of them, I had to agree. So I did. Next thing I knew, She had my hands in hers and she was kissing it. The nearest girl after her had got on her knees and started bowing in my direction. The rest of the group started chanting in Latin. Let me just say, Latin is a pretty language and all, but when chanted by a group of people who are swaying in a strangely synchronized fashion, while also being spoken in a low monotone, it's the fucking devil's language. So at this point, I was thinking I was their next blood sacrifice or something like that. This girl who was basically making out with my palm started whispering into my hand, and I was there trying to frantically make eye contact with anyone that was walking by. But stupid me and my insecurities sat in the most obstructed alcove in the whole goddamn school. A couple minutes went by, and I actually found myself a little bored. They all seemed to have come to a collective end, and the girl released my hand, which was now covered in a mixture of her saliva and her tears, and she delivered the money line. And now, my disciple, you may walk. I lost it. If they didn't draw attention with their prayers, I definitely did when I screamed, "Fuck that! I will walk in 4 to 6 weeks, as was determined by my licensed physician. Leave now, or you will need your fucking Jesus." They sort of collapsed in on me for a second, and tried to calm me down by placing their hands on me, and what I assumed they thought was a calming gesture, but no. Being touched by strangers is one thing. Being touched by strangers who have been making me feel uneasy for longer than I would generally allow uneasiness to surround me is something else. This made me even louder, which gratefully drew attention to my alcove. My friend had been calling me, but seeing as I was forcefully distracted, I hadn't answered. She had gotten worried, and later told me that she followed the sound of my voice, because even though I wasn't screaming bloody murder, my sassiness had a habit of carrying with the wind. Her and some of her other Samaritans broke the circle around me, and threatened to call the dean and have their little club disbanded. They scattered, and my friend sat with me for the rest of my break and walked me to class. We joked that between our 3 legs working, we could Jackie Chan them if they came back for more. Once I sat down in class and took my backpack out of the little basket my scooter had, a bunch of little business cards fell out. I picked one up and it said, "Supernatural Jesus Club. Meets on Wednesdays in rooms whatever, and on the back, scribbled in messy handwriting was, "We can cure you. See you soon." Needless to say, fuck that. Supernatural Jesus Club? Let's not meet again. Ren groupies are scary. Okay, so I'm a historical reenactor. That's kind of important to the story. I'm also a nurse, ex-soldier, and a bunch of other perfectly normal things. But I do have this one slightly off-center hobby, where I dress clothes in about 600 years out of fashion, and sometimes try to hit people with a very large piece of steel, while dressed as a hood ornament. Now, someone really needs to write a psychological thesis on the subject, but for some reason, people dressed in historical clothes somehow become exempt from the usual social norms regarding sexuality and appropriateness. If you are dressed and armored as a Viking and wandering the streets of central Sydney, women will let you pick them up and carry them away from their friends without a word of protest. Try it in everyday clothes and you'll be in taser within seconds, right? And it works the same for women in armor too. Otherwise, normal men respond to armored women in bizarre ways that are utterly outside the normal range of everyday human interaction. I don't know the full explanation of it, but it just seems to be the way that people are wired, you know? So, I was at a particularly prominent and large medieval festival, or fair for many American readers. The atmosphere was very immersive, and members of the public were encouraged to dress the part, while the 400-odd genuine reenactors perform a range of ye-olde activities around the grounds, and spent the rest of the time wandering about, lending an element of medieval color to the proceedings. Armored, I'm pretty cool, if I do say so myself, but my 15th century civilian clothing is to die for. Crimson/silk doublet over black, thigh-high boots with spurs, and a pearl earring. And so I was wandering around the event one evening, being dashing and medieval and interacting with the general public as we are encouraged to do so. And yeah, I'll admit it, being a little flirty and taking mild advantage of the aforementioned sexuality, appropriateness disconnect that seems to take place when women are talking to a guy dressed a bit like Colin Firth in Shakespeare in Love. Here comes the disaster bit. After having fought and wandered and given 2 lectures, by the evening, I was getting a bit wary and sat down for dinner at one of the many stalls selling food. There was a group of young ladies nearby, and playing the part, I engaged with them in character, and we all sat around talking, laughing, and mildly flirting for about an hour or so. Seconds after they left, however, one of them came racing back and whispered, "Hey, our friend really likes you. Here's her email address," and thrust a folded piece of paper into my hand, then ran after her friends. Well, so far so good, right? Nothing boosts the ego quite like having someone give you her number unsolicited, and I was quite pleased with myself. When I got home, the first thing I checked my email there was already an email waiting for me from this young lady. She had been onto the festival's webpage and found my details there. I still managed to feel flattery in response to this, and after all, her email was incredibly nice and a little apologetic at taking such a step unsolicited. And she was cute and had seemed bright and funny when we chatted, so I replied and we sent a few emails back and forth. Mildly flirting, but again, only a few, and when the first nude photos of her showed up in my inbox, several alarm bells went off in the back of my mind, which being male, I ignored. Wow, how much of a stud are you that some woman you barely know is sending you naked photos of herself? Big self-congratulatory grins and self-backslaps all around. Voices of caution firmly ignored. I got a little more flirty, and in response, she went into utter overdrive. The nude photos, which had started out as flirty and artistic, became progressively more explicit, until they were soon the sort of thing that I think may be illegal in Amsterdam. Still flattered, but finding the voice of caution getting louder by this time, I thought it prudent to discuss with her exactly what she thought she was doing. It was around this time that terms like love at first sight, soulmate, and marriage were first uttered. Now, I'm no cad. I don't lead people on with no intention of following through, but I'm certainly not a user of the find 'em, fuck 'em, forget 'em school or anything like that. But this was a whole other magnitude beyond anything I'd ever even considered, and so attempting to be as diplomatic as possible, I politely declined any further conversation. At this point, it's still a funny anecdote. When she hacked my email account, character assassinated me on a number of online forums and associations I was a member of, it stopped being funny. When she out of the blue called my mother, who she told an amazing story about how I had led her on, made her to love, I never even kissed her, got engaged to her, pressured her to have an abortion, and then left her when she miscarried after giving her nothing more than an STD, I wasn't upset? It was the explosive mother phone call that upset me, especially since I had no idea where any of this was fucking coming from. I was utterly blindsided. She also sent letters outlining a similar story to my employer, the organizers of the festival where we met, and even the trashy current affairs TV shows. Fortunately, most people she contacted gave me the benefit of the doubts, not least because they knew that we lived approximately 800 kilometers apart, and that my easily traceable movements pretty well confirmed that we had met only once. So yeah, total bunny boiler. Creepy group of people in the island. This is the most traumatic incident of my life. It haunts me still, after 5 years. Although I grew up in the capital of my country, my family owns a house in one of the many islands. My grandmother grew up there and we inherited the house. This island is extremely beautiful, and we went there for vacation every single summer. Let me give you some of the information about the locals. They're very different from the residences of other islands, mainly because of history. The island was not populated until pirates started dropping off their women and children that they had kidnapped. They returned often to rape them, and this resulted to the island being populated by people that were products of rape. On top of that, there is a specific village with a strange aura around it. They say the residences of the village are full of incest. I believe it is true, because there are a lot of retarded or odd people living there. So you understand that the population of the island, in general, was developed on a messed up basis. It is a highly popular tourist destination worldwide, and if you're not from there, you don't spend much time there, you probably wouldn't get in. Anyways, I was 16 years old and my sister was 14 years old. We were spending our summer there, going to the beach and then going out. We were both too young to understand certain things, Plus, the crime rate in the island is pretty low, and they are generally considered safe. So our parents were calm about us going out until late at night. I should also mention now that it was 2011, so we had cell phones but not smartphones. We also didn't have any credit to make phone calls. That was usual for teenagers at this time because it was expensive, and we did not have a lot of pocket money, so we were often without credit. One night, we were hanging out around the port where we lived when we met a group of local people. They were all about 20 years old and very friendly, so we were happy they hanged around with us. They were 5, 3 guys and 2 girls that were sisters. Their names were Manos, Takis, Stavros, Tina, and Elsa. The girls looked like blonde models, while the guys were your typical local youths with scooters. We were drinking when they suggested that we go to their village, the one I mentioned before, to hang out in the girls' house. The girls had a car, so they drove us there, and the boys followed with their scooters. When we entered the house, me and my sister both realized there was something wrong. It was dirty, and there was a bad smell coming from the backyard area. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to appear rude. Also, we didn't have a car. The house was small. The girls showed us around. When we reached the bedroom of their parents, there were blood stains on the bed. Tina quickly changed the sheets, explaining that their dad got in a fight recently and was bleeding everywhere. She talked like it was normal. I could feel my young sister's fear next to me. The guy sat in the living room smoking a joint. They offered us, but we politely refused. Both of us felt like we needed to be sober, so we should figure out a way to get away from this place. Everybody pushed us to smoke, to the point where we couldn't say no. So I took a puff, but I didn't breathe the smoke down. But my sister didn't know this trick, and she got very high very fast. At that point, I was scared. I had to get out of there. Takis came to sit next to me, talking to me in a flirty way. Stavros did the same to my sister. She was too high to resist. I watched panic while they were kissing, and he was touching her private parts. I was pushing Takis away, saying I have a boyfriend. It was a lie, but he didn't care. I was so scared. Then the sisters sat close to Manos, and both started kissing him. At that point, I stood up and went to the bathroom. My mind was working like crazy. The smell of the bathroom was awful. There was a second door to the backyard. I carefully opened the door. The smell was unbearable. I felt like vomiting. There were piles of trash. I got closer, and there, near the trash, there was a dead cat. To make things worse, the body was surrounded by her kins, also dead. I vomited on the trash, but I decided I have to have a closer look. The cat didn't die a natural death. She was stabbed with a knife in the belly. I quickly realized the kins died unborn. I freaked out so much I almost fainted. My mind was telling me to run. There was indeed an exit from the backyard that would lead me to the main streets. I had to find a way to get to my sister and escape. Shit. All this time, my sister was there in the living room alone and high. I rushed back in, trying to look normal. When I entered the living room, everybody was close to my sister, touching her. Their hands were inside her pants, while the guys were starting to take their clothes off. She was sobering up at this point, and she was freaked out. She was saying, "Please, no, I don't want to." And then, Manos told her to shut up and that she'll like it. I stood there. I couldn't move. Taki stood up suddenly to bring me in their twisted game. Then something happened that I'll forever be grateful of. My sister said she needs to vomit, and it was true. She was pale, and she could barely hold it back. Nobody wanted vomit on them, so they instantly let her go. She rushed to the bathroom. I went after her. She vomited, and then, without saying anything, I grabbed her arm and dragged her out. She was in a very bad mood, almost fainting. We rushed to the exit of the backyard and then onto the main streets. We had no credits on our phones, so I stopped a woman and asked to make a phone call. I called my parents to pick us up. They were very alarmed. I had to explain to them what happened. They were terrified. The next years, we were not allowed to do a lot of things until they finally calmed down. It was stupid to follow some strangers, but we were naive teenagers. When I think of the danger we put ourselves into, I honestly still shiver. My parents thought about calling the police, but it was not very safe. We found out that the girl's father was dealing drugs. My country has a very high level of corruption, and police, honestly, is rarely ever dependable at all, or even an option at all. So we just rented out the house, and never came back for another vacation. Since then, me and my sister are way more suspicious and careful. I am happy we escaped, and I wish we had never met them. So, crazy island locals, let's not meet again.